episode of Cultivate. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another conversation. Today, I have the honor and the pleasure to have a very special guest, Ciri, with me, and her story is just absolutely incredible. I've known her for over 10 years since we started going to Calvary, Alex and I, and her family have just been incredible towards us, and I've been able to get to know her story, her testimony, and I believe that is gonna encourage you today as you listen to it. We're gonna be talking about mental health. We're gonna be talking about finding freedom in Jesus, and really what some people really go through with mental health in their lives, and depression, and so many different other topics. And so I pray and hope that today, as you hear her story, you will be encouraged, and that your faith will be stirred to believe that God can do some incredible things in your life. So, Ciri, thank you so much for saying yes to sharing today and sitting down with me and having a conversation.
Thank you for inviting me here.
I love you, and
love
Alex
you
and I love you, and Manny, and you guys have been with us for many years. Back when we used to have, Alex used to teach classes.
Oh my goodness, the best days.
Those were some fun days.
Yes.
And so thank you for always just being, you guys, such a support and love and encouragement in our lives. We love you very much, and so I'm excited.
My family loves your family very much, and we're very, very grateful that you're our pastors and that we belong to such an incredible church.
Oh, thank you. So we're going to get right to it, and I've heard your story in the past, but I wanted to sit down and really highlight some of the things that you've been through. Before we get to mental health and all that, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, growing up, your childhood. What did it look like? What was life like for you as a young girl?
Well, I grew up in a family that lived in a big old colonial house in Cuba, and we were about 12 of us living in one house.
How many siblings?
I was the only child at that time.
Okay.
So I was me and my aunts, my uncles, my grandmother, my parents. And it was such a beautiful experience for me because every day was something different. Every day something was happening. And since I was the only little girl, all the attention and focus was on me. So it was a lot of fun. I remember reciting Los Zapaticos de Rosa and having a crowd. So it was a lot of fun. And then one day at the age of 9, I got the telegram, back then there were telegrams, that we were coming to the United States. And until that day, I really didn't even know that we were going to leave everyone behind. So that was a really hard blow for me to know that in a few months we would be leaving everyone behind because
your mom, your dad, and you.
And and then at that time my little sister was a year old.
Okay, so you were leaving the rest of your family.
Yes,
it was just
everyone.
You guys. Yeah.
And it's not like now that people leave the island and they can go back and they can revisit, or there's WhatsApp that they can see the people. Back then that was it. We didn't have any communication. So that was a very difficult time in my life. So it went from a very fun childhood to a very lonely childhood because I didn't know the language. My parents started a little business, so we were in the little business all the time.
You guys moved to Miami?
We moved to Miami, and we were here for a few months, and then we went to Brooklyn.
Okay,
and
you had no family. You didn't know anyone. It was just you guys.
No one. So we went to Brooklyn, and we lived there for a year. Then we came back, and my father had a little restaurant. So my sister and I grew up in the restaurant business. So that's where I started meeting all the clients. So the clients became our family. All the people around us that would come every day, they became sort of like the people that were the extended family. And it was at that time when I came from Cuba that I remember starting with feelings of...
How old were you, Ciri, at that
time? I was 9 years old.
9 years old.
When I came from Cuba. And it was around that time that I remember that I started resenting my parents. I wasn't that happy little girl anymore. I would blame them just for having to live this new life. My sister, on the other hand, since she was a baby when she came, she had a totally different experience. Even up to now, we talk about it, and she's like, I had a great childhood. And I said, yes, because your childhood was formed here, and you never knew the other side.
Yeah.
So it was rough for me. I feel that I never knew how to express to my parents how lonely and how sad I was without anybody else, especially my grandmother. I used to sleep in her bed. She would bring me coffee in the morning. So that was a real a loss that I could not. I couldn't recuperate. Even to this day, it's something that it's a pain. It's a big pain in my life.
It's interesting because I feel like unless you've lived it, it's easy to not relate to that. Yeah. Especially when you're a child, people might think that, well, you're a kid, you'll make friends. And, I relate to that a lot because when my mom and I left Colombia, I was 10 years old. And my mom and I left by ourselves. We had no family here. We moved to Miami where we knew no one. And I left my big family. Yeah. And so I feel like for other people, it's easy to say, well, you get over it and you find friends, and you do eventually find friends and make your life. But there's a part of you that has a void and a hole that nothing else can fill because you have left at that point what you've known. And so I can relate to that and feeling that way.
It was a true pain. It was a pain that even now speaking about it, it's there. It's a part of me. It's a part of.
Did you ever get to see them again?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I was 15, I was able to go back and visit with him, and that was glorious. And when I was 16, we went back, and after that, I didn't go back. But my grandmother came every year until I was an adult. So and then my aunts came, and so we did establish the relationship again. And now I have like 32 family members that are here.
Oh, awesome.
So it's wonderful.
So then you had to go through your teenage years still dealing with that and feeling alone because nobody kind of understood.
Correct. And my parents, they wanted to come here, but I didn't. So I felt like they did the right thing because they wanted to get us out of the island. They wanted us to have a better future. Yeah. But in my mind as a child, it was like, no, I don't want a better future. I want to be here with everyone.
Family, yeah.
And I mentioned this because I believe that the way that I processed all that, by not talking about it to anyone, by keeping it inside, by blaming my parents to the point where I was just angry at them all the time, led me to a preteen and a teenage years and an adulthood that was very difficult. So that's why I always like to preface my life with that picture of where I came from, because I think that maybe if I would have been the type of child that would have sat with my parents and said, this is how I feel. I never mentioned it to them. I asked my mom some years ago, I said, hey, how was I as a child? And she said, oh, you were just such a wonderful child, always tranquil, and just a very kind child. And that wasn't the way that I remember my childhood.
Wow.
I remember having turmoil and feeling mad and just feeling all these feelings of bitterness. And then on the outside, I guess I just portrayed to be a totally different person.
Which is how a lot of people live their lives, and people would never know what they're keeping inside. Correct. And the true turmoil inside of them. And you could be a happy person on the outside, but few will ever get to know
and that was
really what goes on. And so how did that affect, like you mentioned, your teenage years and your adulthood?
So as a teenager, my parents were very overprotective since we had no family. My mom didn't want to leave me in a friend's house after school, so I had to go to the cafeteria. So I just felt that I was always in a very strict environment, and I hated it. So I discovered that if I skipped school and I hung out with my friends during school time, I could have my own fun in my own life. And that's what I did. I started skipping, and I started hanging out with friends. And by the time that the doorbell, the school bell rang, my dad was there to pick me up. He never knew anything. So in a way, I had two secret, a secret life. Yeah. One where I was going to do whatever I wanted. In front of my parents, though, I was very compliant.
So you weren't a problematic child. You just had a separate life. Yeah. They didn't know about.
Yeah. Exactly. And even when I would have to have them sign that I hadn't been to school the day before, I would sign their name, So I learned all the tricks on how to look like I was compliant, but in the inside, it was just turmoil. And, by the time that I became a teenager, I was angry at life. I was angry at everyone around me, and I just thought that that was the way that life was. That, that I had to go through life with that bitterness and that anger, and I had no way of knowing how to express it by this time. I had no way of knowing how to verbalize it. And I have one friend that she's still my best friend in life. Since I've known her since I came from New York, and she was the only person that I could sit down with and tell her, I hate life. And she would tell me about why. Your life looks so nice. You have parents who love you.
Yeah.
She came from a family that her father was abusive, and she would tell me, your father's not abusive, and look at the good things in your life. And I couldn't see them. I saw everything black. I never had a perspective of that I had a beautiful family.
Wow.
I never saw that.
That's crazy how sometimes people can see someone's life and think, well, they have no reason to be unhappy.
Yeah.
But inside of you and in your mind, you can have such a completely different story,
Yes.
And real to you. Not that your life maybe was horrible, but to you, certain things.
It was.
To you, it was.
Yeah.
And so, were you a Christian? Did you grow up in church?
No. I wasn't a Christian. I at the age of 18, when I was able to break away from my parents and I was able to do my own thing, my father gave me a brand new car, and I was able to do my own thing at this time. So I started going to discos, and I started thinking, this is the time that I'm going to be happy. I can do now what I want. I can go out. I can stay out till whatever time I want. Not that I could, but I did anyways. Not that my parents allowed it, because my mom would be waiting in the door, in a couch.
But you thought that in freedom you would find
that.
But
I did it, yes. So I thought, now I have all this freedom. I have a car. I'm going to be happy now. And I started going to discos. I became a disco queen. My sons found a picture of me in the internet in Casanovas, which is an old discotheque in Hialeah, where I grew up, like Alex. And there, I'm there looking at. We used to see Madonna and all these artists, and there I am in the front row. And my son was like, "Mom, this is you." So I thought, hey, now I'm going to have fun, and I did. I did have fun. But at the end of the night, when I would get home, that loneliness and that feeling of just never feeling fulfilled in life kept haunting me.
It wasn't what you were looking for. You had fun, but it wasn't what you were looking for.
Because first I thought it was because my parents weren't letting me have fun.
Yeah.
I was blaming it all on them. Then when I could have fun on my own, it still didn't happen. So here I am going to discos, going to the beach, going with my friends, having a ball, supposedly.
Yeah.
But once that was removed, once the disco was removed, once my friends were not there anymore, I was again feeling just very lonely and very sad. And so, and I never knew why. And I would sometimes wonder, why do I have this feeling of emptiness? But I never knew that it was because maybe I never dealt with those things prior.
Yeah.
It's just, and it was like at the age of 19 that I started thinking, I just wish I could die. Honestly,
You thought about it that way?
Yeah. I don't see a purpose to live. But that was just a thought.
Yeah.
That was just a thought that would come and go, but never a plan, never anything else, just a thought.
Yeah.
And then at the age of 22, I was in Casanovas. And that day, I was always surrounded by a group of friends. But that day, I went out alone. And across the street from Casanovas, there was a guy. His name is Chris. And he sold hot dogs. And we always bought hot dogs at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd get hungry. And that day, I crossed by myself. And there was nobody there, which was weird because there was always a whole bunch of people buying hot dogs. And so I sat in Chris's car and I'm eating my hot dog in the front of his car. And he said to me, "Hey, Ciri, have you ever heard about Jesus?" And I said, "Yeah." I asked my mom once about him, and she said, "Oh, yeah, he was a good prophet." Because we went to church like some Easters, some, Christmas, but it wasn't really something that we did as a family. And then, but the funny thing is, let me go back, about a year before, I remember walking, passing with my car by a church, and I told my friend, the same friend that I could talk to, I said, "I belong there." And she said, what? We were just passing by.
Yeah, like a very random thing to say.
Very random. But I remember it like if it was today.
Wow.
And so when Chris said that, it was like, And then I said, well, tell me about it. No, I don't know, but tell me about it. And he goes, well, Jesus, I came to Christ not too long ago. And, he's someone that's very important in my life. I trusted in Christ. He told me the whole gospel. And he said, do you want to go to church with me? There's a group that meets on, I think it was on Tuesdays or Thursdays, and it's a Bible study for young people. I go, oh, yeah, let's do it. So we went. Mind you, I only saw Chris 2 more times after that. Never have I seen him again.
Wow.
So we went to the Bible study, and then I had a friend that was a Christian that I called him and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to church with you. He had been trying to take me to church for like 5 years. So I ended up going to church. It was a Spanish church in Westchester. And I trusted in Christ, and I was in love with Jesus, just all in. I loved the Lord. I became a Sunday school teacher.
How old were you at that point?
22.
22.
When I trusted, I never went back to Casanovas. I told my mother, I came to my mom and said, I'm not going back to discos. I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. I love the Lord. And my mom was like, wow, good. And so I started going to church. I had a great mentor, a young girl that mentored me. And those were some very special years. I met my husband, Manny. He came up to me. He's very artistic. And he came up to me and said, hey, I'm doing a play. Do you want to be my daughter in the play? And I go, well, I've never done a play, but sure.
Yeah.
So for a year, I picked him up, and we would do the practices with a whole other team. And we fell in love. And so at the age of 25, we got married. And we were serving in the church. He was a Sunday school director. I was a Sunday school teacher. We loved the Lord. So we had our first child. And after we had our first child, I started having a little bit of postpartum depression. But, it was something manageable. Then I had my other 2 children. We had them a year and a half apart, so that all 3 kids were born pretty recently. Close. And by the time that my 3rd child was born and he was about 3, we never stopped going to church, but we were not going to the Spanish church that we had gone to. We had gone to an American church, and I never stopped going to church. Every Sunday we were at church, us and the 3 children. But the interesting thing with that was that God was no longer a vibrant part of my life. So that love and that passion I had for God, that was pretty much dwindled, and I was going to church. God's time was an hour on Sundays.
Why do you think you ended up in that place? You think it was maybe the busyness of life at that point?
I think it was a lot of unconscious decisions, maybe. I think I got wrapped up with the kids and life and my business, and God just wasn't a priority to me at that time. It was almost like maybe like when you're dating and you're that very exciting time that if you're not cultivating that throughout the years. I've been married for 36 years. And if we're not dating all the time and cultivating and having little outings, that dies.
Yeah. And it's easy to get there because it doesn't have to be that you're doing something wrong necessarily, but little by little making choices where you begin to put God last in your life and everything else first. It's easy to find yourself in that place.
Yes. And so what ended up happening was that I had left, I smoked a lot of cigarettes before I came to the Lord. And we started having parties, and I started bumming off a drag from my friends who told me, don't do it. Don't do it. But I said, no, just one drag is not going to do anything. And by the time I knew it, I was smoking and I was drinking. And what I realized was that the drinking mellowed my thoughts. And it mellowed me into not feeling so uptight. So that was just something that I started doing pretty much on a daily basis. I don't consider that I ever had an addiction to drinking, but because I always felt that I could stop, but it became something pretty
Constant,
frequent, pretty constant. And so it was around that time that I decided that I needed to go see a psychiatrist, because I don't know if the drinking helped to accelerate my feelings of depression.
Which, did they start as the same feelings you had before? Maybe
Yes.
not. Maybe at that point you didn't think about it as, oh, it's because I left and this happened. But that feeling of anger,
Yes.
that's what started coming back up
Yes.
to the surface.
But it was a forest fire.
Wow.
So now, I'm thinking, I was happy with the Lord. I'm no longer happy. I married so that I could be happy. But, marriage in itself doesn't make you happy if you're not happy yourself. And I had 3 beautiful children, but if you're not happy from within, your children are not responsible for making you happy. So all of a sudden I'm looking at my life and it's like, I'm not happy again. But now I'm not happy and I'm feeling overwhelmed with life. And so I guess because at this point I'm older, I'm already in my 30s.
There's so much pressure now. You have children. Now
Yes.
you're married. It's more stress on your life and things to think
Yes.
about.
So I started going to a psychiatrist, and she had me on a plan, and things. I took some medications that worked for a little bit. My body would metabolize.
Let me ask you a question. When you mentioned the psychiatrist, was it just to medicate what you were feeling, or did they help you find the root issue of what you were feeling?
That's such a good question, because I was having a conversation with Manny the other days about this. She never referred me to a psychologist, ever. She just gave me pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And she never asked really much. My visits were, hi, how are you? How was your week? And
here's this.
That's it.
Yeah, because I think, we've talked about therapy in the past. And it's not to say that psychiatric help isn't necessary sometimes. Sometimes you do need
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
But that's not what you should jump to right away.
Exactly.
There's always a root issue, an underlying cause of this outward feeling, emotion, behavior that needs to be tapped into before you even just medicate yourself. Because honestly, if not, you're just going through life numbed, like what you were trying to do with drinking and with all these things.
Correct.
That's not gonna get solved.
Correct. But I didn't correlate it.
Yeah, at that point
I thought
you
I
just
was
needed
having
help.
postpartum depression. So maybe if I have postpartum depression and I get medicine, that will solve. Maybe this crisis will go away. And the problem with what happened was that I went to a psychiatrist for more than 10 years. And what ended up happening is that my body would metabolize everything that I would take. So it would work for a little bit, months, and then it stopped working. So she would constantly have to start giving me.
So you went 10 years living like this.
10 years.
10 years being overwhelmed, unhappy, dealing with these pressures, taking medication. How did you manage 10 years like that?
I don't know.
And how did your family look like? Your marriage, your children?
Well, the interesting thing is that just like my mother told me about my experience, her experience with my childhood, on the outside, I looked super happy. We had these incredible parties. We had a lot of fun. We went on incredible vacations. I was super, super successful at work. My friends, except for that one friend, my friends never knew. And even with Manny, he knew that I had turmoil, but he didn't know the extent. Because there was a disconnect from inside of me to the outside of me. So my parents never knew. My sister, no one really knew the forest fire that I had inside my soul.
So it's possible to live an outside life
that looks totally different
than how you truly feel on the inside for a long
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
10 years is a long
You
time.
kind of get to I kind of got to the point that I knew how to manage it, and it kind of became who I was.
Did it feel to you at that point that you were switching from person to person? Like, did you have a point where you felt, or was it just so second nature that you
It was
knew
second
when
nature.
to be this person?
It was second nature.
When did you feel, or when would you allow yourself that space to really feel?
I didn't.
You didn't.
No.
Medication didn't let you, or
But the medication really wasn't working. So yes, I'm sure it numbed.
yeah.
And medication plus alcohol gave me huge migraines, which led to migraine medication. So then I fell into this vicious cycle of numbness, maybe.
Wow.
That.
Yeah, so even if you wanted to feel it, you almost couldn't.
Yeah.
But it was still there.
But it was still there.
So 10 years go by.
Yes. And if you would have known me in that time, you would have said, what a happy person Ciri is. She's such a party girl. And on the outside, that's what people saw. But I wasn't going through, like you said, I think that the medication kept me a little bit more controlled, where I wasn't searching inside. I wasn't searching anymore for why was I like this.
Yeah.
What was happening?
You just cruised through it in a sense.
Yes.
And managed.
I think so.
Until you didn't anymore.
Until I didn't anymore.
How did you found yourself in, like, what did that look like?
When you have teenagers, it's a very hard time in life. And I think that having teenagers and just feeling like life was a rug was swept from under my feet. I felt that maybe I wasn't doing things right. I felt that maybe the way that I'm going about life is why everything around my life looks so out of place. All of a sudden, I looked and everything in my life was chaotic. And of course, I went back to the place where I felt comfortable in thinking, you know what, maybe this doesn't have to be chaotic anymore.
Is that thought one of, I can end the chaos and I'll be okay with that? I think this is a topic that's still, as much as we talk about it, difficult to understand for a lot of people that can't relate to that. Because when you think about being at that or getting to that place, you have people tell you, well, didn't you think about your family? Or didn't you think what would happen to your children? Sometimes people will say, well, is that's selfish? And I happen to think differently, but walk me through that. Like, you thought about you ending this. What did you think about, or you couldn't even think about that?
It's interesting. And that is a very good question, because in the place that I was, I didn't care.
Okay.
I didn't care. I didn't care. No one else mattered at that point, because you see, I always thought that people saw depression or someone that's suicidal as a very mild. She's depressed. Poor Ciri. She's going through it. But what it is, it's the biggest form of rebellion, or the biggest form of anger. It just looks passive on the outside.
And desperation too, I would think, that you were so desperate to try to end something you can no longer handle.
But that was my card. That was the card that I held, that I controlled my life with. When the moment that things get too out there for me, I have this card. And it's a manipulation card.
Like, I got an option.
It's an option. It was a valuable option for me. But it was I had the power. No longer did my family around me, or my job, or anything that could go make me stress, have power over me. The moment that I considered that suicide was a real possibility, I was empowered. It sounds ridiculous.
No, I'm following you. It was almost the one thing you felt you had control over. Because you didn't have control over your feelings. You didn't have control over your life, your situation. But that was the one thing you could have control over.
Yes. So that gave me a lot of just a lot of certainty. And I had suicide on both sides. My father's sister committed suicide at a young age in her 50s. And my mother's aunt, my grandmother's sister, committed suicide.
Wow.
So I always thought, this is something that maybe it's in my DNA. Maybe this is just in my DNA.
Did you ever consider how that affected your family? Or again, it was something you didn't even think about?
No. Mm-hmm. My family didn't matter. Which it's crazy because I'm saying it, and my family is everything.
Yeah.
My family is everything to me. I adore my family, but at that point in my life, they were nothing that I could
And I think
consider.
it's what people don't understand sometimes. It's that it's not so much so that you didn't care for them, is that you couldn't at that point. I think when you're in that situation, there's something that it goes beyond that.
Yes.
Even if you did care, because I believe you did,
my feelings
you were in a
didn't-
state that you just could not physically.
Yes.
You couldn't even see it how somebody sees it from the outside.
Yeah.
It's not like, or if I do this is gonna happen. It's just you're in the middle of that situation and you can't see past it.
Yes. So as my feelings became more erratic, as medicine stopped working, I believe that the alcohol helped also with the medicines not working. It was just not a good
Mix.
thing. Inside of me, I pretty much blamed everyone around me, everyone, for life, for my life, for the way that my life had turned out. I felt that, if you were different to me, or if you acted differently, or if you said that differently, then I could be happy. So you see, when I was little, it was my parents. They ripped me away from my grandparents. They ripped me away from everyone. So I'm not happy because you did that to me.
Yeah.
As a teenager, driving, I didn't have that. I couldn't point my finger at them. So here I was, being a teenager, being able to do things on my own, yet I didn't have that happiness. Then I get married, and I'm pointing fingers again because, my husband should make me 100% happy all of the time. That's his responsibility. And that is absolutely, that cannot happen in a marriage. There's ups, there's downs, and there's times that are difficult. And when times got difficult, I would blame it 100% on my husband, which that's a lot for him to have carried for all those years. And it was very unfair, but that's the way that I coped with it. Things are tough, it's your fault. Then the kids, came to be, and kids are kids. And when they're little, you can pretty much control them. But when they start being teenagers and they do their own thing, and then so what they did wrong was my interpretation of, you're doing this to me, now I'm not happy because look at what's happening. You're not making me happy. Wow. So it was just very unfair the way that I never had any gratefulness for my family. I never was able to, and I loved and the thing is that I think I was a good mother. My kids tell me that I was a good mother. So on the outside, I loved them. I always kissed them and I always hugged them. But I had that resentment, which again grew up with me. That's why it was so important for me to tell you that resentment was just a part of who I was.
And it got to a point then that the thought or the idea now became a reality, and you actually decided to act on it.
Yes. So, in 2011, I said, you know what? Life is too hectic. Life is too ugly for me. That card that I've had in my pocket, that's just going to have to, it's just going to have to happen. And so I went to work. I wrote letters to my entire family, to the people that I work with, to my assistant, to my friends. And I decided that was the day that I was no longer going to, continue living. And my assistant noticed that I hadn't come out of my office for 7 hours. I just typed for 7 hours.
Wow.
That's the state of mind that I was in. And I left. I didn't say goodbye. You know, I'm very sociable. I'm always talking, and even then I was always sociable. And so she went into my computer when I left, and she found what I had written. She had access to my cards, and she saw that I had rented in a hotel. And all I remember was all the girls in my office were there. And then I remember police, and then I remember...
At the hotel?
Yes.
That's what you remember? Okay.
Yes. And then I remember waking up, and I was in a partial coma. I was in intensive care.
When you woke up, you were in the hospital?
Yes, in and out. I remember in and out in the hospital. They told my husband that I probably would not make it.
Wow.
And that if I did, I would have, a lot of consequences. And so I was in intensive care for 1 week. And while in intensive care, I called my office and I just blasted the girls, and I said they had no right in intervening, that was not their decision to make.
So that was still your mental state?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So now you felt like somebody interfered with what you really wanted to do, and you were still unhappy.
Exactly.
And you weren't grateful that somebody...
No.
Wow.
Yes. So now it was really weird because now it wasn't my little secret anymore.
Yeah.
Now everybody knew.
Yeah.
So if I went to Publix, the kids were worried, Manny was worried, everybody was worried. And so I continued living. Now it was open, but I continued living in that turmoil. And I still had desires every day to die.
Wow. Did nothing change as far as the help you received or the help you looked for after that?
I started going to a Christian psychologist.
After that happened?
And I manipulated her. I just told her whatever she wanted to hear. It was my husband's idea to go. And she would try to get me to talk. And I would just tell her what she wanted to hear.
Which, now that you say that, that's so important, because sometimes you see people seeking help, and it's easy to, if you don't want the help,
I didn't want it.
You can go and say whatever you want to say, and you're not going to get the help you need. So it takes someone to fully be honest and want the change to be there.
Yes. I had never thought about it like that, but yes.
Yeah. We can fool anybody but ourselves.
Yeah.
It's easy to go. You knew the right things to say. You knew if you say this, they're going to think I'm crazy, or they're going to think that I still want to do this. But deep inside, like you said, you still wanted to do that.
Even when I was, even when I was Baker acted after the 1 week in intensive care, I knew what to tell the people in the psych ward. They were like, oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, no, I don't even know. I remember one counselor telling me, I don't even know why they sent you here. They should have just sent you home, because I was not going to let them know what was in my mind. And I was like, no, that was just something.
How was your husband and your children's reaction to that? And how did that not change what you still wanted to do?
Manny told me that he did not know that I was in that state of mind. My kids were in shock. My sister was in shock. But then I just went back to acting a little normal. No, I'm fine. No, you don't have to follow me to Publix. I'm fine.
It was almost like I made a mistake that happened, but I'm not going to do that again.
Yes. And I have a relationship with my parents that it's very special. And I remember my sister telling me right after I left the hospital, hey, didn't you realize that Dad was having open heart surgery the week after you committed suicide? You tried? And I said, I didn't care. Now, anybody that knows me would know
you
that.
Care.
And she said, you didn't care? She started crying and screaming. You didn't care? And I meant it when I said, no, that wasn't a consideration for me. And that has haunted me. I couldn't be there with my dad when he had surgery. And my mother didn't tell him why. My mother just told him that I was sick. But imagine my mom knowing what I had just done, my dad not knowing, going into open heart surgery. That was, and I say it because people that care sometimes don't care when you're put in that in a certain frame of mind. And I don't know how I got there.
And I ask so many questions because I want people to understand that people that are in a mental state that you were at that point, it's not that they don't care and they don't want to care, it's that they just cannot. And so people around them, it's easy for you to say, but how could you not? But why don't you? But don't you see so-and-so's pain? But don't you see what this... And it's hard for people to understand that it goes beyond that person's ability. That it is something they are physically incapable of doing. And I think when people understand that to that level, it changes how they approach people. Because now it's not, you're doing this to me, but it's understanding that you just simply can't. And it's understanding that I have to walk this with you by your side and not as you don't get it, you have to do this. You can't. It's like telling someone who's depressed, well, just be happy.
Yeah.
Because look around you, it doesn't work that way. And I think it's so difficult for people that mean well and because they love you to not understand the depth of how the mind works. Yeah. So that's why I'm asking so many questions, because I really want people to understand that.
And even to this day, I don't understand it logically. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I feel guilty. I don't know how I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Or my kids or my husband.
Yes, you couldn't.
The people that I love the most.
But now looking back,
correct.
You can, because you're in a different place.
Correct.
How did you go from all of that? How long did that last? How long did you have all these feelings for? And when or how did everything change for you?
This is the happy part. So we started going to Calvary.
You were still feeling...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hated life. Hated everything about life. Was despondent. Hated to go to work. And then I think that since everybody knew by this time, I feel that I was free to be a little bit more open with just,
I don't feel like it, yeah. Yeah.
And so we started going to Calvary. And because my husband, at that time we had stopped going to church altogether, but for a very short time, because like I said before, we went to church all the time. But I had it. I had it with God. You could be at church, go to church every weekend, and still not be connected and have a relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You could be sitting in the most beautiful worship service. I could be sitting in the most beautiful worship service, and I would walk out empty, with my eyes never saw, my ears never heard, my spirit never received.
Wow.
The weirdest thing in the world. And people all around you, I would see people with their hands up, and they looked like, and I would see my husband worshiping, and it was like
you couldn't.
I was in like almost like in a little bubble, like where the people that do the drums, they were, that they're in there. I was in there, and everybody else was outside. You
said you saw life black and white. This is gonna sound like a particular question. Do you look back to moments of your life like that, and you really remember them black and white?
Yes. They had no life. I was living, but I wasn't alive. And I know, it sounds so cliche, but I was. My heart was beating. I was going through the motions, but I wasn't enjoying life. I wasn't. And I like to put it this way, because I saw this. I saw myself like this. I was in a jail cell, right, sitting there, but the key was on the inside. I had it locked. And when I tried opening the door, I couldn't get out. But the key was on the inside. Yeah. All I needed to do was unlock it.
But you just didn't know how to.
Which reminds me of Jeremiah. Call on me and I will answer you.
Yeah.
So that's all I needed to do. The lock, the key was calling. But I couldn't. I didn't know. I didn't want to. I had it.
Yeah. So you start going to Calvary.
I go to Calvary. And I hated it. Hated it. I would fall asleep. How do you fall asleep through worship? Because when I'm dead inside. Worship is nothing. Yeah. So I remember going, I wouldn't even take off my sunglasses so people would know, but my head would bop. So at that time, we were in South, and I would sit all the way on top. So I wasn't even surrounded by people on the second floor. And just sleep the whole time.
Why did you keep going?
Because my husband wanted us to go. And I knew that, I don't know. I don't think I knew anything. I don't think I knew. I went because he wanted to go. But honestly, that's the only reason why I went. And then one day, there was a little clip, a little ad, advertising recovery.
Celebrate recovery.
Yeah. And we went home, and a couple of days later, my husband said, because the psychologist never worked. I went a few times, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 times. I never went back. At this time, I wasn't doing anything. No medicine, no, nothing. And he said, why don't you try that recovery? And I go, recovery? What do I need recovery for? I'm saying this to him. He goes, well, just give it a shot. And so I went, and when I went, and I heard people talk about that they had struggled with depression, that they had struggled with anger, with bitterness, and they were saying things that were inside of me, but that I had never really sat down and talked about. It clicked. It clicked. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe there is a space where I can be around people who are saying these things that they've been through. Maybe I can say them.
Wow.
And so I started going, and I started expressing what I felt for the first time, really. Because I would express things to Manny, and he's a great listener. He's always been the only person that has that I've been able to just talk and never feel like that I have to be edited. But I had never really expressed to him bitterness and anger and rage and resentment. I would just say my story, like, poor me, look at me, look at what life has handed me. And he would listen. But now I was speaking out
people
of...
who understood.
Yes, yes. And I something like lifted in me. Like when I started saying these things, that's why I believe it's so important to speak things out when they're inside. When I started speaking these things out, I started feeling lighter, and I started desiring the Lord.
Wow.
I started wanting a relationship with God again. And when we walked into Calvary, the music was for me. The words, the lyrics, the worship.
You went from falling asleep to getting in.
Yes. I opened the key, and I walked out. And I've never been in that jail cell again. That key was burnt. And the worship was for me. The sermons were for me. Everything was for me. I started reading my Bible, started journaling. I started, I was back to when I was 22, but in a more vibrant, in a more beautiful, in a more lovely way. I started appreciating my family for the first time ever. I started being grateful. Because you see, I've tried this. I can't be ungrateful and grateful at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of what happened to me was that I never knew how to be grateful. Ever. For anything. I wasn't grateful for the car my parents gave me. I wasn't grateful for the love they gave me. I wasn't grateful for Manny's love or my kids' love or my sister's love or I wasn't grateful. I just thought that, yeah.
Yeah.
I deserve it. And they should be doing more. It's just a horrible, disgusting way of looking at life. That God just, it was like having inside me venom, literal venom, that I was able to get rid of, like a cleansing of that venom through gratitude and through seeing things in a different light.
So little by little, now with an open heart,
Yes.
willing to take that help, to receive that help, willing to look in and recognize those areas of your life.
Yes.
So now you have recovery, you have people you can speak to, you have tools to figure out what's happening inside, and you have Jesus.
Yes.
Those things working together now
Yes.
brought you to the other side.
Yes. Yes. So about a few months after going to recovery, I never took another drink of alcohol. I never smoked another cigarette. It took a few months, believe it or not, to get there.
Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process.
Yeah.
It wasn't like
anything else.
it wasn't
in
like I
life.
just left everything. And and for me, those were very important things, because those were part of what kept me in bondage. That was my bondage. And so I replaced the cigarettes and the alcohol for worship music, for hanging around beautiful people.
So it had to be a conscious decision you
Yes.
made to purposely
Yes.
separate yourself and change things around you that I'm sure it didn't come easy at first.
No.
But a conscious decision every day that you had to do over a
Yes.
period of time until you felt like you were finally free from that.
Yes.
And you have been
Yes.
ever since.
Yes. Yeah. And so in 2013, a year, when we started taking the Bible study with Pastor Alex and you.
Yeah.
And I always tell him that was transformative for Manny and I, because Celebrate Recovery was something I did on my own, but the Bible study was something that we did together. And it was the most exciting things to all because it was a very participatory class.
Yeah.
It was all very interactive, and we still have friends. Our best friends, Roderick and Margaret,
Yes.
are from that class, and we still have wonderful friends from there, and Rick, and it was a participatory class, so that brought us to another level. We started to get even more excited about God and learning more about God.
Such a beauty in community, and we say it all the time, but
Yes.
hearing stories like yours, it really comes to life, and it really makes such a difference. You realize that community really changes your life,
Everything.
and it helps you, and it puts things into perspective.
Everything.
Beautiful.
And so I got to know Zori and Lisa, who were my mentors. And what that did was that I started realizing that I don't have to react to people and things around me. I could things could be chaos, and I could choose to have a great day.
Yeah.
That was
Wow.
like what?
Groundbreaking. Yes.
No. And then I one of the people that I love the most, although she will never know me, is Joyce Meyer. And my husband and I adore her. And we go to her conferences all the time. And one thing that she taught me, and she gave this to me, and I held on to it for life, was that I don't have to let my mind wander. This is in one of her books. I can have a thought, a suicidal thought. I have not had a suicidal thought, to God be the glory, for 11 years. Okay? But at the very beginning, when they were still floating
Lingering,
around,
yeah.
I realized that I don't have to let that thought linger. I can capture it, and I can cast it. Literally, she said, casting is not a passive thing you do. When you cast a stone, you have to grab the stone and you have to throw the stone. And God wants us to cast our thoughts to Him. So I took that, and every time that I would have a thought that was an old thought, a thought from the place that in that jail cell that I didn't want to be in, I would literally grab it, and in my mind's eye, sometimes even I would even hold it in my hand and cast it and say, I am not going to elaborate on this crap. Sorry for the word. But I'm not going to elaborate on this. This is not who I am. This is not where I want to think about, and this is not where I want to be. And so all that just started becoming like a further and further removed from my mind, until my thoughts were
Changing now.
replaced. And when I could tell you that I could have fallen into a great depression, and I didn't. Well, my father had cancer, and he went through the whole cancer thing. Never once did I feel depressed about it. I was joyful. We were doing this together as a family, and never did depression cross my mind. But when COVID hit, I was in the titter-totter because I'm a social being, and just having to be home and knowing that I'm responsible for my parents who are elderly, so I can't really do anything that could jeopardize them because I never cut relation. We all stayed in contact all the time. So COVID was very difficult, and COVID was a test.
But you had tools now.
Yes.
And you chose.
Yes. COVID was the ultimate test for me of whether I was going to be able to continue living a free life, a joyful life, the life that the Lord has given me, or go back. Because, mental health and joy, it doesn't stay with you forever. You have to work it every day. Yeah. I wake up every day, and sometimes I have this feeling in my gut. This is going to be a horrible day. I'm so anxious. Oh my God! And then I'm like, wait, cast. Wait. Why? I haven't. Nothing has happened. I'm not even up from bed, and all these thoughts clutter my brain, wanting to bring me into that space. And it's like, no, I don't have to. I don't have to elaborate on this today. Yeah. And I grab it all and I cast it to the Lord. And sometimes it takes a little bit more. Yeah. Sometimes it takes really, coming before Him and say, Lord, I can't with this. I need for you to help me with this day. One day my dad cut his arm. You'll hear me talk about him all the time because, he cut his arm very, very badly. And I went outside after I had called 911, and I threw my hands up and I said to the Lord, I can't with this one. I can't, but I need for you to really keep me together, and I need for you to help me. And He did. Yeah. And so I've had very hard times.
But now it's possible to live a different.
Correct.
Yeah. Ciri, what would you say as we come now to an end and we wrap up? What would you say to someone who is watching right now and maybe they're not in that mindset yet that you were at as far as having suicidal thoughts, but they are struggling with that, with being a certain person on the outside, but struggling with how they feel on the inside? How could you encourage them, or what would you tell them that they should do to get out of that place?
I think verbalizing is, for me, the biggest tool. Find a space, a place, a group of people. For me, a psychologist didn't work, but that doesn't mean that they don't work. It was just maybe I wasn't ready at that time. But find someone that you trust, that you can be around, that you can verbalize. And I think that once your soul is lighter, you can then start to see reality more, and practice gratitude. I say that now, but I couldn't practice it then. So maybe we have to unburden first. Maybe gratitude isn't something that we can grasp until we unburden. So maybe it's letting go of whatever. Everything has a root. Everything has a root, and I didn't know that. I guess I knew it on the outside, but I didn't know that I had to deal with my root before I could get to the place of freedom.
Knowing that you're not alone as much as you think you are, that there are people that are willing to listen, and that you should speak.
Yes.
What about for the person that has a family member that's dealing with some of the things you dealt with? What would you say to them to better help and understand that person?
I would say encourage them like Manny did, to find a group. There's many groups. If the problem is drugs, there's a group. If the problem is alcohol, there's a group. For us Christians, there are Christian groups. There's counseling. I would encourage them, instead of giving them advice and talking, they're not going to listen. Even a professional counselor didn't get through me. But I think that if they can unburden themselves, first of all, pray, because I know that my whole family, diligently prayed for me, and my mother and her church prayed for me, and Manny and the kid, everybody prayed for me. So pray for them that they would get to a part where their heart is softened enough that they would desire to unburden. Once I think that we speak out what's inside of us, I think that we can see a little bit clearer. And then at that point is where the Lord becomes, more real, because we don't have all that junk in our soul.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for being open and vulnerable and just being willing to sit down and relive some of those things. And I'm honored to sit here with you and hear your story. And
if anyone at church feels that they want to reach out to me and they want to, ask me some specific questions, I'm not a master in the area, but I can help them, maybe to guide them a little bit through what they're going through, because I've been there. Maybe a family member, I help people. That's my journey.
Yes.
I want God to use me, even if it's for one person in my lifetime, that I think that it would have been worth.
Yeah. And I know today's conversation is going to help a lot of people. So thank you. And if you're watching today, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for giving us some of your time. And our prayer and our hope is that you would be encouraged, that you find tools. And then once again, that God would really stir up faith within you to believe that there is hope for your life, that there's no place so far that you're out of his reach, that you are within God's reach. And like Ciri said, if you need any help, let us know. If you need help finding one of these groups, if you don't even know where to start, contact us, send us a message, write a comment. We would love to help you. And know that as much as you might feel like you're alone in this, you are not. You are not alone. And so do not believe that lie that comes to tell you you have no help, there's no one there for you. You do have people around you. And in any way that we can help you or be a resource to you, contact us, reach out to us. We would love to help you out. And we love you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.